Huddle Up Podcast is sponsored by Arena Eats. Log on to the website arenaeats.app, that's arenaeats.app, for the ultimate fan experience. At your favorite sports venue, Arena Eats mobile app, pre-order, express pickup, and in-seat delivery. How do you place your order?
Hey, everyone in, let's go. Huddle up on 3. 1, 2, 3, huddle up.
No one, and I mean no one, comes into our house and pushes us around. This is your game now, gentlemen.
Russian 3, dropping 8. Uyangalele steps up, loads and throws. It's caught. It's pitched backwards, up in the air. It's on the ground, still in Clemson's hands. And now it is down. It is over. And the Irish have knocked off number 1 Clemson.
Fans on their feet. Rally towels are being waved. Brad Lidge stretches. The 0-2 pitch. Swing and a miss. Struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
Eller for the draw. And as the puck drops, the words that DC fans have been waiting to hear since 1974, the Washington Capitals are the 2018 Stanley Cup champions.
And now, welcome everyone to the Huddle Up Podcast.
We're not going to be fucking sucked this year. We're the Stanley Cup champions. Yeah!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Huddle Up Podcast. We are live Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. It is Tuesday night, January the 26th, 2021. We are glad to be with you. Make sure you are subscribed to us on all podcast platforms, and you are following us on our social media accounts. Facebook and Twitter are at Huddle Up Podcast, and on Instagram, we are at Huddle Up Pod. We have the full crew in here on this Tuesday night. We'll start with Dave. Welcome back, Dave, after a few weeks. How we doing?
We're doing pretty good here, Jim. Happy to be back. One more game of football left this year, but another day in paradise here, right?
And your favorite quarterback of all time is back in the Super Bowl. So try to hide your excitement on that one. Matt back with us after a few weeks off. Matt, how we doing?
Doing well. If you watch 3 Count Thursday at all, you know that Matt doesn't drink alcohol during the week anymore. So we have a diet Snapple.
Ooh, any flavor to that or just straight up?
This is the Takes 2 to Mango iced tea.
Clever. I like that. Takes 2 to mango. And then, of course, back here for a consecutive week, I've lost count. Sean, how we doing?
Oh, we're cruising. Kind of a warm day today here in Tampa Bay. Got the shorts on outside, shorts and a t-shirt. It's a little humid and foggy, but we're doing great. Obviously, big sports week here in the Bay. A lot to talk about down here if you want to listen to it. But if you don't, they're going to talk about it anyway.
I was going to say, how's it going avoiding the talk down there in Tampa?
You can't, but it's early. So, you pretty much, it feels fairly typical at this point. I'd imagine come week 2 of game prep when you've run out of things to talk about and all of a sudden you have to start talking up the opponent more and, talking about all the ways that like receiver number 5 is going to do well, how Scotty Miller is going to be the hero. You start to get all that going. But yeah, it's not too obnoxious yet, although Tampa Bay is pretty obnoxious. I don't hate it as a catchphrase, but it'd be cooler if I was a fan of their squads.
Wait, that's a thing. That's
oh, they call it Champa Bay. I mean, why? Although, can you really say Champa Bay? I mean, I understand you now have two of the three were in. All three were in the finals. One of them has won so far.
Right.
If you go 1 for 3 after making finals in all sports, can you even say Champa Bay?
Conference champ Bay?
I guess. Although, and then you have people that are arguing, well, the Rowdies, the MLS team down here, also they did win a championship here as well. I suppose you can't take anything away from what they did, but still, Champa Bay. I don't know about that. You brought in the Raptors. That was a mistake. On the year you're trying to coin Champa Bay.
I saw a great picture. It was the Lightning, either their TV broadcaster or their radio broadcaster, but he like shared a picture on Twitter, like they don't travel to road games, they call from the arena. So he's calling Tampa, I forget where they were playing. He's at the arena, but the Raptors court was on the floor. It was just like the most bonkers picture. It was like the hockey bubble with when you have like the Calgary Flames home jerseys in the Edmonton Oilers locker room. It's just all these weird images that sports in 2020 and now 2021 have given us. So
I will give Tampa the Lightning a ridiculous props. One, they didn't officially raise the banner. They unveiled the banner in the first game. They're not going to raise it until fans are in the house. But that day, because they didn't have any fans coming in addition to unveiling the banner there, they made like 8 replica banners, and at various times throughout the day unveiled them at different public spots around the bay. There's one in St. Pete, there's Clearwater, a couple in Tampa, like all the major hubs around the county. The cheerleaders and the mascot and everybody went to that location and like unveiled a banner, and they're leaving them hanging so you can get around and see.
That's pretty solid.
It was a pretty cool idea.
Yeah, I will give him that. That was pretty cool. To not have it up, obviously, without fans currently in the building. So let's look at this past weekend. Of course, conference championship weekend in the National Football League. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers win the NFC. The Kansas City Chiefs win the AFC. Your Super Bowl matchup is set. But obviously, the biggest point of contention in the NFC championship game was the call that was made on I guess it was a third down, the holding, pass interference on the Packers. People obviously throwing their hands up because calls were a lot was let go in that game. Scotty checking in with us. How you doing, Scotty? A lot was let go in that game. They decided to throw the flag there at the end. So I guess the first question, Dave, we'll start with you. We'll work our way around. Should they have called the game differently throughout the game? Should that penalty not have been thrown? Your thoughts on the decision to throw the flag at that point?
Yes, I mean, I think number one, I like the way they called the game and pretty much let them play. Should they have called the flag, thrown it there or not? Probably with how they were calling the majority of the game, letting them play. It's probably more of a tic-tac call, but you look at the NFL this year and you probably see that flag in more games than not based on that actual play. I mean, he had a handful of the jersey, so chances are it gets called. Whether I like it or not, I mean, I really could care less one way or the other. I mean, I like the overall arching of the game where they let them play for the most part and flags weren't really prevalent. So, again, I have no real issue with the call because he had a handful of jerseys, so technically it is pass interference. But the issue is that you kind of let them play earlier in the game. But again, I could care less one way or the other. It's always back to that adage that if you're close enough in a game that a penalty decides it, then you didn't play your best type of thing. So kind of my stance on it there.
Fair. Matt?
I was surprised that the flag did come out, just given how the rest of the game had gone. I don't like the call necessarily because it definitely has the impact of the game. Like the refs know at that point that the game's over with that call. So I don't like that side of things is into play. I'm sure we'll talk more about it though, that Green Bay had already lost the game, in my opinion, before that had happened. So it's tough to be too mad. Like I said, surprising that they made the call the way they did. But if you're looking at it, it was the right call. There were other jersey pulls throughout the night that I had noticed, but that one seemed a little more egregious than the other ones that had been let go. So I would say that right call, but wrong time.
Yeah, and I think that was my point. There was maybe one or two calls that I felt were as egregious as that one that that were let go throughout the game. Now, obviously, there was things throughout the game that were let go that could have been called, but regardless of the time point and the scenario around the game, that one was about one or two in the most flagrant of calls in the game, and people may not like it. People can we can talk about consistency. We've talked about consistency with NFL officiating for the entire course of time we've been doing this program. So that's nothing new. But the fact of the matter is I thought that call was a good one. You can argue about different ones. I thought that one was a good one. We'll talk obviously a little bit more about that point, Matt, that the Packers had kind of dug their own grave at that point. But Sean, your thoughts on the call?
Well, I mean, it's definitely pass interference. I mean, kind of like Dave alluded to, it was a pretty obvious call if you're looking at it from a rule perspective. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't that catchable of a ball. I mean, it was definitely catchable. But I mean, to be honest, I don't think he needed to grab that jersey to stop the play from being a success. Now, you don't know that doing the play, but I'm kind of like it's already been talked about. I think that the consistency piece, the fact that type of penalty had been going on the entire time, kind of uncalled. You've been letting him handshake. Like that's the trouble is you built that play up to be something that's talked about because you let the hand checking and you let the playing go. It's near the line of scrimmage. It's not downfield. I don't know. I mean, there was a couple calls on similar plays during the game that happened. So, in the grand scheme of things, it's in the spirit of what Matt said. If you don't want that call to decide the game, then take the lead while you have the ball. It's hard to really blame it on the call, but I do think that it was probably a poor choice, especially as late as the flag came in. It started to look a little weak there.
That didn't look great because I mean, it
didn't help the situation.
No, but it was about one of the only moments in the game, and I mean, I wasn't watching, with eagle eyes the whole game because the Capitals were on as well at that point, so I was watching more of the Caps game. But there wasn't a missed call or a bad call to my recollection at any point in the game where I was like, like that had to be called immediately when the ball sailed and I saw the grab of the jersey. I was like, there has to be a flag, and I was like more shocked that there wasn't one, and and then it came in late. So and that goes back to issues with guys asking for flags and they come in late a lot. That has been a predominant problem in the NFL for going on the better part of a decade or more now, and it seems to be getting worse and worse and worse. But really, you go back to the series before, and there's obviously other points, but especially that series before, is a couple of straight second down, third down odd calls, but then the decision to kick the field goal, I thought really was one of the most like cowardly and just the most baffling decisions from a coaching and a play call standpoint. And I see Scotty here says the same thing. He says more mad about the fourth down call by the Packers. And I mean, you heard it in Aaron Rodgers' post-game comments is he's like, if I would have known we were kicking, I would have done something a whole lot different on third down. Which there's I think deeper issues there, which people have kind of called into question where Aaron Rodgers might end up being next year. But the Packers, I felt, did kind of seal their own fate when they you can call it chickening out, you can call it playing weak, whatever way you want to describe it. But I just feel like when you're in a game, especially in a game where the Bucks were way out in front and the Packers battled back. Why I don't understand going conservative at that point. That one really confused me, and I don't know if that's a young coach just being inexperienced in that moment or what. It was very confusing. Sean, we'll start with you on the way back. The Packers coaching decisions.
Well, yeah, and I think, obviously you're kicking the 3 to avoid the 2, I guess. Instead of letting it hang on one play, you're trying to give Aaron Rodgers a series of plays. There is the idea. Either way, you're going to need your defense to make a stand. But on fourth, you're not going to get any closer. The bigger issue for me wasn't it wasn't a coaching decision. It was Aaron Rodgers was scrambling right. I think it was on third down on that drive, second or third down, and he's scrambling right, and he's got the whole field open in front of him. Is he definitely going to get in? I don't know, but he's going to get at least to the 2 or 3, and he winds up throwing. I guess it would have been second down because he wound up getting some yards after that. But he throws into like triple coverage to try to squeeze one to Devontae Adams in the middle of the field, and I thought that from an Aaron Rodgers that I know, it just seemed like a really questionable decision. Obviously it's at real speed, and you want to get it in the hands of your best guy, but I thought that was a moment
a lot different than ours, so he may have seen something that we can't.
Yeah, and obviously if he thinks he can put it in there, he probably can, but it looked like plenty of defenders to stop it, and I felt like, for a guy that's made a lot of his career getting outside the pocket and picking up those yards with his feet, it was kind of a disappointing play for me. But yeah, I don't understand not going for it. Statistically, and when you get all your analytics guys really broke it down, the difference between, the risk of doing either really isn't that different. You still, because the idea is if you go for it and you force your defense onto the field, you have them in a pretty good spot and you need them to make a stop anyway. But I don't know. They almost made a stand again there and when they gave the ball back. So,
and I guess they were looking.
It looks more questionable, I think, than it is. Because if the defense makes a stop, Rodgers gets the ball, whether he scores on the last drive or not, nobody's really going to question it at that point. No. It's the fact that, and they, for all intents and purposes, if the flag was a mistake, they would have forced an opportunity most likely to get the ball back and at least have a shot at it. But, anytime Rodgers has a Hail Mary option, it's still possible.
And I guess that, they're looking at the fact that they were down 8. So if you kick the field goal, then you're down 5. All you need is a touchdown to win. But that goes back to a coaching decision of going for 2, probably prematurely earlier in the second half. Which
that's what got me is they went for 2 earlier and were in essence trying to avoid going for 2 at the end of the game. Baffling.
So it just there seem to be a lot of questionable things. Scotty here says Kevin King cost the Packers a game with Scott Miller's touchdown before halftime.
King was a liability.
Well, he was a liability, but in the same time, it's hard to say that you can cost a team a game before
retire.
It certainly did not help. It
wasn't just that play. He got burned on several plays and was out of position on others. It was a horrendous day for him. He should change his last name because he's not the king of anything.
And when Tommy smells blood, he goes for it. So, Matt, your thoughts? Yeah, elaborating on the Packers coaching decisions.
Yeah, I saw what Sean saw. It looked like wide open green for Aaron Rodgers on that play. I was kind of surprised that he pulled it back and threw it into double coverage there. I guess trying to get Adams a touchdown in the playoffs. I don't know what the logic was there, but it just seemed like a questionable decision from a guy that we have seen pull that ball in and run for the first down touchdown before. So I didn't get it. I kind of understood what they were trying to do with the field goal. Tom had not looked great in the second half. He threw multiple interceptions. Defense had stood up a few times, so I get what they were going for. But when you have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers and you have the game on the line kind of at that moment, I think I'm taking my chances trying to get the touchdown there. And if not, then we're resting our defense and we're at the 8-yard line and we're pitting them back with good field position if we get the ball back then. So that would have been my line of thought, but I'm not an NFL coach by any means or even close to it. Hindsight's 2020, they say.
Jake here says you can say Kevin King. Awesome. Dave,
No doubt.
You said your thoughts on some of the Packers coaching decisions down the line.
Yeah, so the first thing I wanted to touch on was the early 2-point conversion. I think that's the right move because it gives you the opportunity that if you miss it, you're still in it later on. So it kind of gives you 2 chances versus just one that you really only need one of them type of thing. Doesn't really make a huge difference one way or the other. The other thing is I think that if Rodgers takes off there and runs, it probably completely changes your situation later in the game there a couple plays later, because instead of it being 8 yards to go, you're probably at 3 or less. Realistically, I mean, I think we can all 5 or less. I think we can all agree to get to the 5-yard line at least. And again, you take your chance. You take your chances with. I mean, Jim could have gotten to the 7.5. So we'll take our chances.
Close.
I was giving you the fall forward. So
I was gonna say they tackle him forward. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I think you're down that close. To me, and again, I don't know. The analytics seem like from everything I've seen, it's within 5 to 10% one way or the other, but. Regardless, in my opinion, you go for it and you give Rodgers another chance. And I mean, you got one of the best QBs in the game right now with a chance to, 10 yards out. And if he doesn't get it, you're in the same position that you were in by kicking the field goal. You're still down one damn score. So, I mean, I'd rather have a chance from the 10-yard line to wing something in than from the 50 with Rodgers. I mean, even if everything plays out perfectly, you're probably not getting the ball much across midfield there. So, I don't understand the logic on not going for it. I mean, anytime you can cut an 8-point game to a 5-point game with 2 minutes left seems kind of pretty idiotic to me. But it's also probably a reason I'm sitting on my couch being a quarterback coach on Monday morning. So what do I know, though?
There's plenty of reasons.
Speaking of Aaron Rodgers, because obviously, the Buccaneers, Tom Brady is 10 Super Bowl. We ran down the list of accolades last week. We don't need to do that again. I know Dave's still recovering from hearing all of those accolades. But Aaron Rodgers, the post game presser, he kind of made a couple of comments alluding to some coaching decisions, this and that. There's been some speculation that this is a guy that wants out, that feels that he's going to be able to find his way out of Green Bay after this year. Do you guys think there's actually some smoke to that, or is this just Monday morning quarterbacking after what was a close and difficult loss for the Packers? Do you think come start of next year? I mean, I'm not even going to put my input in because I had Rodgers traded at the trade deadline this year. So
yeah, you had him by like week 4.
my points is completely invalid on this one. But do you guys think that Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback for the Packers next year, Sean?
Yes. Yeah, Matt? I think a lot of it's speculation. I do, and the Packers have come out and said otherwise. I don't see a lot of ways why go somewhere else. You're one of the best of all time.
That's fair, Matt.
Yeah, I think he wants to continue that legacy in Green Bay. I mean, he has to kind of look at what his predecessor did and Favre's career upon leaving Green Bay. Do you want to go down that road, or do you want to give it one more shot, maybe 2 more shots with a team that you know very well? You have a very good running back, a great receiving core, and a really shitty defense. So, get that turned around in the offseason. Packers probably be right back where they were.
Dave, how about you?
So I'm going to say the Dave answer and say I don't know. I saw a couple internet quotes today, and I didn't have a chance to follow up on them that much, but I saw that Rodgers apparently had some pretty intriguing comments today to the media. It might have been yesterday and getting my days mixed up. But he pretty much, from what I saw on the analyst report, saying that he pretty much is putting the Packers on notice that if they dick around in the draft again and don't get him some help, Again, whether that means offensive line, defensive line, receivers, etc.
Yeah, that's pretty open-ended, yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if that's, he wants more involvement in the draft or what he's saying there. But I think some of it, too, depends on what happens with some of your other quarterbacks and movement. I mean, if he can, perfect example, and I'm not saying that this happens by any sense of the means, but if Brady retires and there's a huge quarterback opening in Tampa Bay and you have those, those four amazing receivers and running backs there, what quarterback wouldn't want to go and hop on a front run contender like that? So I think he stays in Green Bay. But I think that it's going to get very hairy, to say the least.
Well, the big thing to worry about if you're hopping on a Tampa train or something like that is because currently, like, you're still going to be known as one of the best of all time, but you have this little monkey on your shoulder of like, well, I couldn't quite do it another time. Like, I only won. I mean, one's good enough as far as I'm concerned, but like, people are kind of hanging that on him, like, of all the near misses. Going to a Tampa Bay, I don't think helps that. Because even if you win it, it's not going to be because you did it. It's going to be because you just like went and like helped it. Like I feel like it's almost like LeBron didn't do that, but he gets called that all the time.
Well, and
you went and bought a title, or you went and did. Like, I just feel like it's not going to help your legacy at all, and I think like Matt's kind of alluding to it. Beyond a team like that, I mean, I would argue Green Bay's offense is maybe not as like power packed in names like categories, but I don't know. It's one of the better offenses in football. I don't know that you necessarily pick one over them.
But like, okay, so let's say that Brady and the Bucs win the Super Bowl this year. Aaron Rodgers goes to Tampa next year. Brady retires. He's like, you know what? I won 7. I've won more than any team has. I'm done, which I don't think is going to happen. I think Brady's going to play at least 2 or 3 more seasons.
10.
He might at this point, but
52.
Let's just play it out. And Tom retires. Aaron Rodgers goes there. He's like, all right, cool. This team's lined up. Defense is great. Receivers. He goes there and doesn't win the Super Bowl. Doesn't even make the Super Bowl. Because there are people that have called Aaron Rodgers like resume in question because he won one early and just hasn't been able to like replicate that success. And I mean, when you win one, it's one thing. And I mean, his numbers and everything else he's done, it's not like he's a Trent Dilfer. Like, let's not try and confuse things. He is one of the best quarterbacks, in this generation. But does it hurt his legacy more if he would go to Tampa next year and can't win? I think it's more damaging. Like, if I'm him, if you go anywhere, which I don't know that he does, but I think it's more damaging if you try and ride, Tom Brady's coattails and you can't get back to the Super Bowl, can't win it. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think, like I said, it's not going to help his cause to go down there. And as far as his legacy goes, we know he's one of the greatest of all time. Sure. I mean, the fact that is he going to get named as the best? No, because he's not Tom Brady. Like, he's not going to be.
Right.
But I mean, you have other guys that Aaron Rodgers has almost the winning percentage of Peyton Manning. I believe Aaron Rodgers is currently sitting 3rd in regular season winning percentage. And if you look at the postseason, Peyton Manning and a couple other guys, I think even Drew Brees, like, these guys aren't exactly like mountains and miles ahead of 50% in the playoffs. These guys are, Peyton Manning, I'm pretty sure, has pretty much about a 50% win percentage in the playoffs. But, he did get his second. He lost in one Super Bowl. And, I think that, kind of calling into question guys' winning percentage, the fact that Andy Reid had to deal with that for years of like, well, you get there, but you can't. Like, people that say that have no idea how hard it is. Like, once that funnel narrows down to your 8 best teams and you're playing against the best defenses in football and the best coordinators and coaching staffs in football and the guys that are going to just make you look. Once you're in that pool, anybody can beat you. Any one of them. I mean,
Jim Kelly made
the Browns or the Bears.
And
even the Browns can, apparently. They did that this year.
Like that Bills team in the 90s, they may not have won a single Super Bowl, but like whether people want to call it a dynasty or not, it's dynasty adjacent at worst. You made it to 4 Super Bowls, like it just so happened you ran into a Cowboys team that was a juggernaut, and you had
and a Mark Rippon,
a Giants and a Redskins team, but
near Hall of Famer Mark Rippon, near.
Yeah. I mean, if
he stood outside at once,
he would have gotten that second one, but yeah. Well, Jake here says it's Rogers being Rogers, sports media wanting a story. He said he thinks he's saying as well. Ultimately, I think he does too. I think if Rodgers is going to end up outside of Green Bay, it's going to be a situation like I thought could have happened this year, where the team's just that bad that and the writing's on the wall, and you trade him to a contender. I don't think.
By the way, fun stat for Dave: with his win on Sunday, Tom Brady has now tied Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees with 1 NFC championship in his career. Same number as Drew and Aaron. So congrats to Tom on just one more check.
Just to make it known, he's got more NFC championships than the Cowboys since
it is
94,
true.
95, whatever the number is.
That is true. That is true. In the last 25 years, that is statistically correct. Early Super Bowl storylines. Of course, we'll predict the game next week. We'll have a better line on the game next week. I think it opened at 3.5 for the Chiefs. I haven't looked to see if it's moved since then. I'm sure it will move by the time the game kicks off. But let's go around here, guys. Early thoughts on where we think the game's at. I mean, I think what was it? The Chiefs left tackle out now with an Achilles injury, so he won't play. I think that is going to obviously help the Buccaneers, whose defense has come on big time over the course of the last few weeks of the season and through the playoffs, which has been one of the storylines. I think this is a great Super Bowl matchup. Personally, you have the old guy that had the old dynasty. You have potentially the start of a new one with the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. I don't think you get many better matchups when you looked at the playoff field this year, and old versus new, and young versus old, and new team and new legacies and all of that. So Dave, your thoughts on any of the early storylines to Super Bowl 55?
Yeah, so I think I agree with you. I think this is going to be a hell of a game. You got probably the two best and most fun teams that are going to be just with players and storylines that you could have gotten there, in my opinion. I think that we're not doing any predictions at this point, just to be clear on that, or are we looping those in too with this?
I mean, no official ones. I mean, if you want to throw out who you think will win at this point, you can do that. But we will officially predict the game next week.
All right. Well, my opinion is not going to be changing. I'm looking at this from the first things that I'm looking at games to break them down is really with who's got the better lines, and Tampa Bay has the better offensive line, the better defensive line, statistically speaking. They're getting Antonio Brown back in all likelihood, plus the injury that you mentioned on to the tackle there for Kansas City. So I am fully on Tampa Bay here. I do have a Tampa Bay future from earlier in the year, 35-1, 40-1. So we're going to keep riding that. Also grabbed Tampa Bay 3.5 on the line open. So, it's still on Tampa Bay here, sadly, that the old man's going to unfortunately teach another trick to everyone just to again prove how he is the greatest. And it's going to be terrible to watch, but it's the right side. Tampa's the right side, just with the weapons and everything. The one caveat on that is if given the advantages on the line that Tampa's going to have, if holding is not called, and you have a reffing crew that's not a big holding crew, that's something that could really benefit Kansas City. You look at the Super Bowl last year, there was not a single holding call in the 47 times that Patrick Mahomes dropped back. So that's something that can really swing and play the game a little bit. So little factors like that have a huge output on the course of the full game. But I'm definitely liking Tampa Bay here without a doubt, straight up, of course.
Matt, your thoughts on some of the early storylines going in towards the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big focus is just going to be the storyline of Tampa Bay being the first team to play for the Super Bowl in their home stadium. Because of course, why wouldn't that happen? Of all years. I think there was kind of the passing of the guard storyline before with Tom and Patrick. So I think that this time they'll really play up that QB battle. I don't think the Tampa Bay secondary has the speed to keep up with Kansas City. I think that's the only reason why I'm hesitant to lean towards Tampa Bay. I mean, if the refs let them hand check all day like they were against Green Bay, then I would definitely be wrong with that. But I just don't think in terms of keeping up with them down the field and Mahomes' ability to kind of get outside the pocket, I think that's going to be the difference maker. If he has more than 3 seconds to let his guys get open, I think it'd be a long day for that Tampa Bay defense, because as good as their front line is, that secondary has always just kind of been a question mark. I mean, we even saw it against Green Bay. There were a lot of deep passes from Rodgers that just corners getting burnt, and the Packers do not have the speed at wide receiver that the Chiefs do.
Yeah, no doubt. Sean?
Yeah, I think the secondary is definitely a storyline in itself. Obviously, you had one safety miss the championship game and another get hurt in it. Obviously, 2 weeks should help that. You kind of got to keep an eye on their health. However, they're definitely going to need safety help with Kansas City. The pass rush is probably the biggest storyline, and Dave alluded to it with the tackle injury. I think Tampa's pass rush, if they can do what they did, because I mean, Pat Mahomes, when given time to throw, is more effective than just about anybody. But the pass rush, if they can get to Mahomes, if Mahomes winds up on his back, even half the drive, one down out of every half the drives that he drops back, I think Tampa's got a real good shot at winning it. I'm also currently just kind of still high on the Chiefs. I think Andy Reid throws a lot more, disguised packages and a lot more looks than Tampa's used to seeing. Even in a very offensive, kind of division with New Orleans and Sean Payton, I feel like that offense got a lot more boring this year, and you still lost to them twice. But there's a lot of speed. Hilaire's healthy. Hilaire looked good, I think, in the championship game, as good as he has since being out for that amount of time and with 2 more weeks. I think the addition of Hilaire to the offense and kind of that offset with Williams, I thought their backfield looked as effective as it has in quite a long time, especially compared to a Le'Veon Bell. So that just adds another look to things. But I like Tyreek Hill to have a pretty big game, or at least have a lot of looks in this game, especially with the success Devontae Adams was having against that secondary. But yeah, super excited that it's my hometown here in the Super Bowl. Should really help the COVID situation down here. In a state where masks aren't required, nobody has to do anything. You pretty much do.
Don't worry. You also have between 30 and 60,000 wrestling fans coming in 70.
So it's not just the fans of the game. It's the bars and the breweries and the parties and I mean, if I was in Philadelphia, I was back home, Philadelphia area, and the Eagles were in the Super Bowl, I'd be just as concerned. Because who wants to watch their team in the Super Bowl? Like, it's easier for some of us to watch this Super Bowl and be like, well, I'll just hang out with my man Jake and we'll just watch the game in a living room. But if it was my team, I'd be like, I want to watch this with every Eagles fan in the world. So it becomes this it's that temptation, and down here with that temptation not being really forced into remission, I see that being quite the issue down here in the few weeks after the Super Bowl. So another potential negative storyline of the Super Bowl.
Well, and I mean, that's a storyline to watch. I mean, the NFL, obviously, as the pool of teams that are playing has gotten smaller and smaller, there hasn't been any positive tests among active players.
Well, welcome to Florida.
But now you're looking at a situation where you have 2 weeks, you have a full week off before you really, kind of start a different set of game prep and things like that. Now, I also think things like your media weeks and your media blitzes around the Super Bowl are going to be a whole lot different this year. You know, the one thing that I've always loved is not only listening to the Dan Patrick Show during Super Bowl week, but they're watching their TV simulcast, because they always do. You know, they set up a studio somewhere near the Super Bowl, and they have celebrity guests and athlete guests and stuff like that, and they make it a blast. I don't imagine that's going to be a thing, and Super Bowl like Media Row is not going to be a thing, and so that's going to be a lot different. Probably all going to be virtual, like everything has been over the course of the season. You know, but just the players themselves, like, does anybody get complacent during this? You know, I don't want to say week off, because it's not that they are not preparing, but like all it takes is you know, one person, one person's spouse, one person's girlfriend, one person's, you know, somebody within their kind of family bubble makes one bad choice, and all of a sudden, you know, it can have big consequences. So that is obviously going to be something that is watched, not necessarily this week, but the testing and the testing results once the teams go to Tampa next week. You would hope that by this point everybody's pretty much locked down in all their individual bubbles, but you know, like I said, it can. We've seen it. You know, it's one of these things that can.
We're looking for additional Grubhub and whatever drivers, knowing that Andy Reid's coming to town. Going to be a lot of drive-through.
There you go. There's you know,
make sure we get him his Uber Eats.
Sign up now. Maybe
what are the odds Andy Reid orders from more than one of those at the same time?
Maybe what you should do is what's that Gold Belly where you can order this stuff from anywhere in the country? Order him some like Pats or Geno's, and then just deliver it,
shipped down.
Just deliver it to the hotel.
But I think all that leads to like the other big storyline for me, which going in at least to this point was Budweiser and now a couple other sponsors like Coke and Pepsi pulling their ad money away from the Super Bowl, not buying into the 30-second spots and giving that money to kind of just aid in the distribution and awareness of the vaccines. I think that's a pretty positive and definitely a pro storyline for me. Props to those companies for doing so. Might just have to drink Budweiser at some point during the Super Bowl just because they did that.
I'll say I've always been, you know, when I was in college, my one roommate and I would always get a 30-pack of Budweiser, and we would split it, and we knew it was safe because nobody else was going to drink it. So I've always been a Bud guy. So that was cool to see. Yeah, and I mean, to the vaccination thing as well, of course, limited fans. I think the NFL is looking somewhere between 20 and 23,000. But around 7,500, I believe I saw, is people that, essential workers, healthcare workers that have been vaccinated, and they will be allowed to go to the game on the NFL. I think the NFL is gifting them tickets, and from what I've understand, it's people from all 50 states, and so it's a pretty cool thing the NFL is doing. I mean, obviously a pretty smart PR move by the league as well. Let's not lose sight of that. I mean, it is definitely a PR move by the NFL, but a cool.
Just make sure you're not inviting any of the Eagles medical staff. They're not going to be able to help anybody.
That is the truth. So, guys, let's pause here unless anybody has any other thoughts on kind of these early Super Bowl storylines.
Just have one comment to make. What do you think happens if one of the big quarterbacks, Mahomes or Brady, comes down with COVID? Do you think there's any chance they postpone the game if something like that comes up?
Postpone, absolutely.
It's
not that I'm wishing it. I mean, 100% not wishing it, but it would be so interesting on what happens if. And I mean, I think if your quarterbacks get it, it's one thing, but what happens if a Tyreek Hill gets it, or like a Mike Evans, something like that, like a second tier player?
I think if it's anyone that's a star seller, a jersey seller, a game changer, and I don't know where that stops. Obviously, you have a tackle that's in anything. I think if COVID causes an issue, I think the game moves. I don't think it's a game that's going to hurt for ratings moving later. You're not playing in a city where it's going to get colder or weirder. You already have less hoopla around the stadium anyway. You just move it, and if a few hundred people can't make the game now that had bought tickets, I don't think they'll have any trouble selling him. So I say move it.
Yeah, I'd say pause it. I mean, I think college football had kind of had a plan in place where you could wait a week on the game. I mean,
Andy Reid can stay at my house for a couple weeks.
but yeah, I think you should absolutely pause if it's one of the quarterbacks. Matt, your thoughts?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was moved back sometime, just because the fans would want the product on the field. I mean, no one wants to see a backup quarterback in the Super Bowl against Tom Brady, right? Hey,
Unless it's Nick Foles. Woo!
Hey, like I said, I said this last week. My wife is related to Chad Henne through her stepdad, so we are a Chad Henne house. We would not hate it on the other on that side. So let's pause here, guys. I mean, like we said, it's definitely something that we're going to watch over the course of the next week. But we're going to pause here, and we're going to hear from our sponsor. When we come back, we're going to talk some quarterbacks that are on the move one way or the other. We're going to talk about the Baseball Hall of Fame voting. Stick with us. Huddle Up Live.
Messages. We'll be right back.
Huddle Up Podcast is sponsored by Arena Eats. Log on to the website arenaeats.app, that's arenaeats.app, for the ultimate fan experience. At your favorite sports venue, Arena Eats mobile app, pre-order, express pickup, and in-seat delivery. How do you place your order? You're listening to NGSC Sports Radio. Hear us live on ngscsports.com, where you can get awesome analysis on all things sports. Or check out our podcasts on iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, and much more. For our latest videos, subscribe to NGSC Sports YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter at NGSC Sports, and like us on Facebook. NGSC Sports. We never stop. Welcome back, Huddle Up Live, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Make sure you are subscribed to the show on all podcast platforms. Make sure you follow us on social media at Huddle Up Podcast, on Twitter and on Facebook at Huddle Up Pod, on Instagram, and make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel as well. We'd appreciate that. And if you're following along in the live video, interact with us and give us a like and a share. We'd appreciate that. As many people in here as possible never is a bad thing. So we will get to the Baseball Hall of Fame voting. Those results came out earlier today. But just a couple more items in the National Football League. Phillip Rivers announcing his retirement this past weekend. Most of his career spent with the San Diego / LA Chargers, and finishing up his career with the Indianapolis Colts. His career stats, guys: 240 starts, 64.9% completions, fifth all-time in passing yards with 63,440, fifth all-time in touchdowns, 421, 209 interceptions, a career QBR of 95.2. But one of the big questions I've seen since the announcement of his retirement is Phillip Rivers a Hall of Famer? Obviously great numbers, was never really able to not only, put it together in the playoffs, but I always look at, when it came down to the clutch, like, could you trust Phillip Rivers? And, you can make arguments about, did he have the cast around him? But I never felt that you could trust Phillip Rivers when the game is on the line. To me, I think numbers are great. I don't think he is a Hall of Famer. I think it's very similar, oddly enough, when you talk about how their draft when they came into the NFL played out. I think it's very similar to Eli Manning. The difference with Eli Manning is 2 Super Bowls. I personally still don't think Eli Manning is a Hall of Famer. I think he will be in the Hall of Fame, A, because he's a Manning, and B, because he won those 2 Super Bowls. But I don't see Phillip Rivers' resume being strong enough to get him into the Football Hall of Fame. Dave, we'll start with you. Is Phillip Rivers a Hall of Famer?
Oh, he's a Hall of Famer in the Gambling Hall of Fame because no one covers the back door like Rivers. When you're down 10 with 30 seconds left, he gets you home every time when you got +6. So there's a huge bonus for that. But the thing you have to consider with Rivers is the era that he's in, with all the numbers being inflated and things along those lines. His numbers are there, but it's also an inflated era. But I think, and I don't want to spoil my rant on this baseball Hall of Fame thing, but I think a lot of the Hall of Fame depends on how the members in the media feel, the media being the main one. And is Rivers liked by the media? And you got to take that into consideration on these borderline guys now, because that's a clear component of it. And I think that Rivers is a Hall of Famer, not a strong Hall of Famer. I mean, it's not like trying to vote Dan Marino in, but I think he's a Hall of Famer. It might not be a first ballot type of thing, but I think with his numbers, he gets there.
All right, Matt, I saw you shaking your head before I even asked the question. So is Phillip Rivers a Hall of Famer?
No. I think he has good numbers, but I think at this point in this stage of the NFL that we're seeing, where the passing game kind of dominated the NFL, you're going to see a lot of quarterbacks that had really high statistical numbers in passing yards, touchdowns, especially if you played, and started over 15 years. So I don't think that he did enough in the playoffs to warrant getting to the Hall of Fame, and I don't think his stats are good enough to warrant it on that end. So I think that he's just going to miss out, much to the chagrin of his 37 children.
Sean, is Phillip Rivers, and we're talking real, not fantasy football, because gaudy fantasy numbers, but is Phillip Rivers a Pro Football Hall of Famer?
Well, before I get into my take, I'd like to apologize to his wife's uterus. Lord knows the punishment that's going to take with him not having football to play during the course of the year. Career and his legacy going forward. Yes, Phillip Rivers, in my opinion, is a Hall of Famer. Phillip Rivers, we're talking about a guy 17 years, 8-time Pro Bowler, pretty good. And like you said, the stats are going to be inflated, just kind of in general in this era. And you're going to have these guys. You're going to have the, is Matt Stafford a Hall of Famer conversation in a couple of years. You're going to have the is Matt Ryan a Hall of Famer. I think both those guys are. And I think the issue is like, yes, it's a different era of the league, but nobody really said that about running backs when it was that era of the league. They're just all like really high on a list. So they all just kind of like, yeah, well, they beat Walter Payton, so they're in. It's with running backs, you don't have the issue of like, well, they don't have any playoff wins. Like, people forget that there was an era where the wins and losses weren't hung on the quarterback. They still are in everybody's minds, but it wasn't necessarily the way the game played out. And to me, I think with these guys, if they're in that top echelon of passing, I think you just got to let them in and let the fans be like, you know what? Because unfortunately, sometimes when the media does vote, like Dave alluded to, you get guys in that, maybe, he shouldn't be in. Or how did that guy not get in? And it's brought up a lot of times. Should coaches, should players be involved in the Hall of Fame process? And I'll tell you this, if people in the league were involved, Phillip Rivers would be in a lot faster than he's probably going to get in. I think he's liked by a lot of people in the league. He's just kind of one of those funny guys, just kind of the dog in everybody without cursing, I think is hilarious. Like he's on referees all the time using like made up swear words. I think it's hilarious. But I don't know, 95% or 95.2
make up square
rating,
47 kids,
2-to-1 touchdown to pick ratio, and I don't know. I don't see any reason why not. I mean, we're talking about a guy that was the MVP of the 2000 Micron PC.com Bowl. He's clearly a professional football Hall of Famer. I don't know. I think he was a great face of the league. I think he kept the Chargers relevant for a really long time, and he was very influential in the fact that because of him, Drew Brees went to New Orleans and wound up doing way better than he would have anywhere else. Yeah, give me Philip Rivers in the Hall of Fame. I think his bust will be hilarious, and you can just kind of build little busts of his kids all around.
Well, they put a bolo tie on the bust. That's the question. If he gets in,
I certainly hope so. I imagine, does he get to make that call? Is he like, this is what I want my bust to be wearing? Do they get to choose that? I would think.
I would hope so.
Like whatever you're wearing when you get the cast made, or like whatever, just put this on there.
Another one, and this isn't a quarterback who is retiring, but you brought him up about potential future Hall of Famer is Matthew Stafford. We saw the reports. He will not be back in Detroit next season. I don't think there's anybody happier about that decision than Matthew Stafford. I think he probably wanted out of Detroit for a number of years. But there's a lot of intriguing places that he could land. There's obviously the rumors about Houston and what's going to happen to Deshaun Watson. There's Indianapolis needs a quarterback now. There's the Cowboys. They don't have a quarterback under contract for next year. A starting quarterback. There's tons of places with a lot of intriguing storylines. Where do you think, Sean, we'll start with you. Where do you think Matthew Stafford is under center next year?
I think it's very early to make that call. I think a lot of that's going to shake out with NFL Draft Day. You're going to have a lot of I don't think it's going to be with a low ball team. I feel like any of those teams that are, in the first few picks of the draft, they're going to find their guy as best they can and kind of go with what they have. I like those middle of the pack teams. Like I like the idea of Indianapolis, who is in a rare position to hop 1 year after 1 year from like nearly retired quarterbacks. They could hop from a Phillip Rivers to a Matt Stafford to maybe a late career Aaron Rodgers to like a Tom Brady at age 50. Like they could do all that and just never have to draft one and just keep riding.
They're a team that, everything else is ready to roll. You have a great defense. Yeah. You have a great running game. You have a really good receiving core, solid tight ends, pretty decent offensive line. Like that seems like a team that is really just a quarterback away.
Yeah, and I think like an interesting team when you're like, whether it's Matt Stafford or not, I don't think he's the right choice. But an interesting team in the QB mix is going to be Houston, in that whatever Deshaun Watson decides to do, or whatever he decides to force a hand, they may be looking for one. So I don't know. I think Matt Stafford could wind up, unfortunately, or fortunately for him, I think he still has enough in the tank. He's not going to wind up, holding a clipboard anywhere. So that's good. But I would say my early runnings would probably be either like Indianapolis, maybe a Miami situation if they feel Tua is not ready. But I don't see that being a scenario. But yeah, I don't see it being any of those first handful of teams to draft. It's going to be somebody in the middle.
Matt, where do you think Matthew Stafford ends up?
Well, it's definitely going to be an AFC team. I don't foresee the Lions traded him within the conference. So aside from the teams mentioned, I'd say the one that hasn't been mentioned yet that I could see being a possibility just because they don't really seem married to their quarterback, and that would be the Las Vegas Raiders. I think that he would be an interesting quarterback for them to have out there, barring what they want to do moving forward. I don't think they see Carr as kind of their answer. So I could see them. Yeah, right. So I could see them making that move to bring him in, just to kind of get some flash into that new team, new city still, because I don't even think Las Vegas people are really thrilled about Carr either. So if you make a big splash with a trade like that, I think it gets people in Vegas and more excited about the franchise that they now have.
Dave, where do you think Matthew Stafford ends up next season?
I think it's going to be very interesting on where he goes, and some of that's going to ultimately depend on what Deshaun does. I've heard that Deshaun's going Jets and or Dolphins are the two that he's most interested in. Again, whether how true that is or anything else, who really knows? But I think there's the more important, interesting issue with that is that it's pretty clear that the Dolphins aren't overly set on Tua, which is kind of an interesting development. But back to the question at hand, I think the one team that's very intriguing that I've heard have had some interest in Stafford is the New England Patriots, and just putting him on that team would be very interesting to see what happens, and with Belichick, how that works out, type of thing would just be very interesting to see. Dynamically speaking, it would kind of give him a proven quote unquote quarterback. I mean, proven with the Lions, but still someone that has a clue compared to the clown that they had there previously. So. We'll take that how that goes, but I think New England would be very interesting.
Caps just scored with 26. The Caps are down to two healthy centers. Eller went off injured. Baxter went off injured. Justin Schultz, new capital this year, just scored to take a 3-2 lead. The Caps hopefully looking to avoid what would be the first time they've ever gone to 5 straight overtime games if they can get the win here. Well, I know a lot of Caps fans, and Dave, I know you're one with me. Like I've seen some Caps fans mad about like how this team always goes to overtime and loses. I'm like, the fact that we're making all these games go to overtime with this depleted roster between injuries and COVID exempt list, I'm actually pretty excited about the early developments with this roster in the Laviolette era.
I could just tell you it makes me real happy because we go to overtime in these divisional games and we're pissing off both the Flyers and Penguins fans at once. So screw them both.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like normally you go out to Anaheim and you lose in overtime. It's not that big of a deal. But the other weekend when you had the 2-game series against the Penguins win 2 games, but they only get back 2 points because the Caps earned a point in each one. So overtime becomes a lot more interesting in the NHL this season. But I was thinking about New England about a potential interesting landing spot for Matthew Stafford, but another one.
I would buy New England. I would buy that.
It's going to depend on what Alex Smith decides to do in Washington, because I think he released a statement at the end of the season that like all options are on the table. Obviously, considering retirement, I think a big thing in his life was to get back to the NFL. Then he had the calf injury late in the year, and you maybe start to question, do I really want to risk any more injury? Because here's the thing, like Alex Smith, I think is a pretty smart NFL guy. I think he could end up as an offense or a quarterbacks coach, pretty quickly after he chooses to retire. And then obviously it'd be a lot safer. I think Washington could be a very interesting team. Caps finish off the win there, 3-2 over the Islanders. But I think Washington's a team to watch in the Stafford sweepstakes if Alex Smith does choose to retire. Final topic tonight, guys, before we get out of here. This came through this evening. The Baseball Hall of Fame, the Baseball Writers Association of America, you have to hit 75% of the votes. And for the first time since 2013, there will not be anyone inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame this year. Curt Schilling received the most votes, 71.1%. He fell 16 votes short. Barry Bonds, 61.8. Roger Clemens, 61.6. Scott Rowland, 52.9. Omar Vizquel, 49.1. Billy Wagner, 46.4. Todd Helton, 44.9. Curt Schilling has since reacted to this and said that he actually does not want to be even included in the voting next year, wants to leave it up to the Veterans Committee at a later point. I mean, I think he sees the writing on the wall. I think for guys like Bonds and Clemens, the writing is on the wall as well. So we'll get to Schilling because I think that's the most divisive of the group that is not not been voted in. But Bonds and Clemens, growing up, these are two guys that were huge in the game of baseball. But we've kind of seen over the years the decision to kind of disclude some or all of the steroid era from the Baseball Hall of Fame has been a controversial decision over the years. And my stance has always kind of been this, like, I don't necessarily feel bad for the guys because, I mean, everybody made their choices, but in the same time, when you don't include a certain sector because of steroids, you're basically creating a gap in the Baseball Hall of Fame, because there's going to come a point where it's like, well, what happened between 91 and 2000? When you're looking at guys that are in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And I always kind of thought it as this is you almost have to just kind of steer into this again and be like, this was an era of baseball. We can't necessarily avoid it. It's history. It was there. If you look at the history of professional baseball, it's going to be there. I don't necessarily think that these guys should be discluded. Sean, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've always kind of been on the train of like, it's just so hard. I mean, we have some positive tests, we have other like alluded positive tests, we have hearsay of like, well, I saw this guy doing it, and we have these receipts and those doctors, and there's been a lot of question marks with that whole generation. And you look at some guys that are from that generation that are either in or going to be very soon, and you have you have your Ken Griffey Juniors and your Cal Ripkins and these other guys that everybody is, I mean, are they 100% sure they never took steroids? Can you be 100% sure? I mean, obviously Griffey wound up with injuries late in his career, and he never, inflated his body or anything. But, as far as I'm concerned, when you have a guy like Rickey Henderson in the Hall of Fame, there is no doubt in my mind Rickey Henderson was one of the fellas taking steroids during that era. There's no positive test to prove it. There's none of that. And maybe with the guys that have these tests hanging over them, that's going to be a thing. But I think there's an element in my mind of like an all or nothing mentality when it comes to that generation of baseball, where if you're not going to let guys in because they set records or they did things during that era, tests or not, then why should anybody else who played in that era? And if it was that competitive that guys were taking steroids to keep their starting job, who's to say that guy that played second base an extra year or two didn't set any records but had a pretty long career and gets in? Like Billy Ripken, not good enough to get in, but may have taken steroids. Brady Anderson, not good enough to get in, definitely took steroids. Guys, arms were enormous.
The guy went like a stick figure to
his career home run numbers were like 11, 15, 7, 55,
52,
14,
38.
Yeah, somebody was on the juice. I heard he had an ear infection, got prescribed something for it. Anyway,
nasal spray.
But I guess that's kind of one of my points, and it's hard when like I said, like for you and me, like you alluded to, and for an entire generation of baseball fans, these were the guys they grew up watching. Like some of them that are still into baseball, like these are the guys that got them there. And don't forget that era was pretty much like just kind of like we aren't looking because they needed it to save baseball. Like I'm with you. I say let the fans make up their mind. It's kind of along the lines of that the passing records that I talked about earlier. If you don't think he should be there, don't look at his statue. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to count the record if you don't want to. Like don't be like, oh, there's an asterisk next to the 700. Fine. But it's really hard, if I'm looking at like my son and like we wind up in Cooperstown one year and he's a baseball fan and he's like, well, Dad, who has the most hits in baseball? And I got to explain why he's not in the Hall of Fame. Well, who has the most home runs? Well, he's also not here. What about strikeouts? He's probably not here either. Like,
right.
Those guys were dominant in an era where they were facing pitchers and hitters that were doing steroids, weren't doing steroids, played a long time, didn't play a long time. There was a lot of reasons why those guys shouldn't be there, but I think there's way more saying they should.
And I mean, for a lot of those years,
Kurt Schilling not being in is a travesty.
I mean, we'll get to Schilling. That's a separate topic, kind of in and of itself. But Matt, your thoughts on like guys like Bonds and Clemens?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to put them in the record books, then I think that they should be in. I think Pete Rose should be in. So I don't necessarily agree with the voting of who gets in, who doesn't, based on, baseball writers being like the old men's club. They're like, oh, well, I didn't like Roger Clemens and he took steroids, so he's not getting in. It was part of the game. I think we all understood back then. I think even, at the time it was happening, we were, especially with Bonds. You look at Barry Bonds in Pittsburgh versus Barry Bonds in San Francisco, and you can see that something changed. So, I mean, we're not
It's like
naive.
California weather.
Sure. Yeah, that's what
all that Bay air he's breathing in. So, I mean, if you're just going to ignore, what these guys accomplished, then you need to ignore it throughout all. So if you're not going to take them out of the record books, you're going to put them in there with an asterisk, then you put them in the Hall of Fame with an asterisk. I will say, though, I am not going to complain about Scott Rowland and Billy Wagner not getting into the Hall of Fame. Two undeserving pieces of shit.
Tell us how you really feel, Matt. Dave, your thought on guys like Bonds and Clemens.
Yes, I mean I'm in agreement with everyone here that Barry Bonds is a Hall of Famer. Period. Roger Clemens is a Hall of Famer. Period. Pete Rose is a Hall of Famer. Period. This is a Hall of Fame about what you did on the baseball field. It's not a fucking high school drama club on who is better in, voting homecoming king and queen type of thing. This is about your baseball stats, and everyone knows that the steroid era happened. So this is like saying that we're going to forget the whole 10-year period, like you've mentioned, and you're going to have you even got to look to Sosa and McGuire based on those couple of seasons that they put in. And I know I'm stretching it a little bit, but clearly on the juice, no doubt. But how many people weren't on the juice during that time in realisticness? And when you can't make that determination, you got to put them in the Hall of Fame, and it's about the stats that you accumulated on the field. I mean, this isn't about, who was the best for the community and who was the nicest to the media and things like that. This is about the stats that you got on the baseball field, and that's the key point here. It's not the who was the nicest person to interview after the game or who was the most comical. It's about your stats between the white lines type of thing, and you can't tell me on those stats. Again, everyone knows that there were steroids, so you're going to be on that without a doubt, knowing that what happened during that era, but you can't tell me that those three don't deserve to be in. I mean, you have one of the most prolific hitters in baseball history, one of the most dominant power pitchers in recent memory there. And then you have Pete Rose, too, which is a whole nother conversation that we could talk about for days on end. But, these guys, pure stat-wise, should be in the Hall of Fame, and there's absolutely zero doubt about it. It's a travesty for both the enigma of the Hall of Fame and the fact that they are not voted in. I mean, you made your point by not making them first ballot Hall of Famers, but get over it here. These guys are Hall of Famers, and this is just ridiculous that we're even having this conversation.
Yeah, like Ann brings up a great point about like Soriano. He's a guy that put up great numbers and wasn't on the juice, and even he says here Bonds, the longevity of the game even before steroids. Jake says Bonds and Clemens Hall of Famers. Doesn't agree with Matt about Scott Rowland though. And then you go to then you go to the situation with Curt Schilling and I think that, you kind of compare this to, in different ways to a guy like Terrell Owens with the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Because to me that guy was a first ballot and wasn't in, and now Curt Schilling obviously is not going to be. Now Ant does agree with Matt about Scott Rowland. It's Rowland as a tool bag, but
great.
But so Curt Schilling, obviously, tremendous numbers. One of the more dominant pitchers, in his era, 3 World Series. Doesn't get voted in, and you look at some of the things he's done, some of the things he said, over the past couple of years off the field. To me, it's the hard line, because you like a guy like Tio should be in. Should Curt Schilling be a Hall of Famer? He absolutely should. But like that said, I don't feel bad for Curt Schilling, but if you listen to things Curt Schilling said in relation to this, he doesn't feel he doesn't necessarily feel bad about it either. He said just leave it up to the Veterans Committee, and if they put him in, then they put him in, and if they don't, they don't. Like I don't feel bad for Curt Schilling. I think Curt Schilling is a piece of shit. But the guy was a hell of a pitcher. So based on what he did on the field, he should be a Hall of Famer. I'm not going to feel bad for Curt Schilling that he doesn't make the Hall of Fame. I don't feel bad for Curt Schilling about anything really that happens to Curt Schilling. But like, should he be in the Hall of Fame? Yes, he should be in the Hall of Fame. Dave, we'll kick it off with you on this one.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, it's kind of going on that last, thing there that, you're judging people for what they did on the baseball field. Like, I don't care if they're the most charitable off the field or if they're the big pieces of shit. Were they a good baseball player? This is not the, who is the Walter Payton Man of the Year getting in the Hall of Fame type of thing. This is who is the best baseball player. And yes, I mean, if you're borderline, maybe that plays into it a little bit, but I mean, this should be stat driven, and I'm more irritated that Roger Clemens didn't get him personally than Curt Schilling, in all honesty. But you have the steroid factor there. But it's you got to look at who's on the ballot, and it should be Clemens and Bond should be getting in. I mean, those are the two that should be in from the ballot. Schilling's probably a potential third there, but you got to look at. To me, it's Clemens should be in before Schilling, based on the dominance of the era type of thing, in my opinion. But Schilling's made some mistakes off the field, of course, putting it, nicely. But should that play into his Hall of Fame, credibility? Do you really want that as a Hall of Famer? And kind of what they've done off the field? No, but you're not judging them on what they did after retirement. You're judging them on their playing ability. And, I mean, come on, he's a Hall of Famer.
Matt, you're Curt Schilling.
Yeah, I 100% think he should be in, given the, again, longevity. We saw him get to the World Series with multiple teams. The storyline with him up in Boston was huge. The miracle season for the Phillies, that he was one of the catalysts for getting them to that World Series. I mean, they certainly had no business being there, but he kind of willed them to that World Series. What's happened since then, you kind of look over it, and I 100% do not agree with things he's said, things he's done. I'm not a fan of Curt Schilling, the person, and that certainly does kind of take away a little bit from Curt Schilling, the player, but not enough to me that it's like, he's not a murderer. He didn't, come out and do terrible things. He's just said some awful things. I have a hard time not putting him in the Hall of Fame just because of what he did for the game of baseball. I think it's important enough that he should be in there without a doubt.
Sean, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of, we've talked about the popularity contest enough that, it just kind of comes down to, people don't like Curt Schilling and it's like, well, we have the power to vote no. And, there's enough people, voting that are voting on what they saw on the field. And unfortunately, it just wasn't enough to get him in again. I look, like these guys that seem to have an issue with players. Oh, he's a rude player. He says, I don't agree with him. I don't like him. He's an asshole off the field. It's like they're comparing him to guys from like the 1920s and 40s and 50s. Like those guys were all assholes. Like the league was full of womanizers,
terrible people,
gamblers. Like those guys didn't have, like, there just wasn't the media coverage to cover it. You know what I mean? Like, it just, like, there's nobody that is ever going to convince me that Babe Ruth was an all-around good person. I've seen the guy in pictures. I've heard stories about him, like his ties to the mob, his ties to all these other, like, Babe Ruth was not a good person. Sorry if you think he's like the crown prince or the king of baseball.
He's not a saint. Like,
there was nothing that man did that was, he was probably like, I'm going to go play baseball. I'm going to go grab a couple prostitutes and head down to the casino. How about you boys? You want to come? Like, and people would have been like, yeah, that's a good idea. Let me just tell my wife I won't be home. Like, it's just literally what that era was probably like. I just assume. And he lived right down the road half the year, right down the road from my house. Pretty crazy. Anyway, in the midst of that, Curt Schilling should be in. Obviously, I think that to answer the Scott Rowland question that Jake threw up there, He basically told the city of Philadelphia to F off and weaseled his way out of town to go do well for St. Louis. And basically there was nothing he could have done to impress me after he basically weaseled his way out of the contract. There you go, Mickey Mantle.
Mickey Mantle was alcoholic, was
I
praising.
want to say, besides from Lou Gehrig, I don't think there was anyone on that Murderers Row team that people would look back on and be like, "Oh yeah, good guy."
I'm pretty sure Joe DiMaggio killed a guy. Wouldn't doubt it.
Ty Cobb was terrible.
Ty Cobb's loved by baseball. First of all, Ty Cobb, greatest hitter by far in the history of baseball. Not good off the field, not a great person. But those guys were all alcoholics. They all died of liver disease.
Oh yeah,
cancer. Every one of them. Or they died in the war.
Yeah, Ant says here, why isn't Bonds in? He never failed a test. They tested him. We all know he cheated, but I think for a portion of his career, again, it wasn't illegal, or certain substances weren't illegal. So,
McGuire and Bonds both were big creatine pushers.
Yeah, I mean, so for a portion of their career, they technically didn't do anything illegal, but I think everybody wants to go back to the purity of the game, sort of a thing. You don't cheat the game.
Purity of the game. I just want to do a quick shout out to Shane Victorino. Was a one and done. Was on the ballot. Didn't get his 5%. Won't be on the ballot next year. Honor to be nominated for that guy who spent a good 8 years battling in and out of the minors and off of people's lists to make a late push in his career. Just to be nominated, pretty impressive for the Flying Hawaiian.
That's something to remember is some of these guys, they go back to the purity of the game, and I think that's why Ant says Soriano was one and done as well. The purity of the game, and I think that ties back to the Pete Rose situation, and why that's such a controversial topic is because the one rule that everybody always had is you don't bet on baseball, and he kind of broke that cardinal rule. This is the one thing you don't do, and he knew it. You come into that club, and he did the thing that you're not supposed to do, and he kind of has paid for it, and obviously that debate is for another time and place.
Now, apparently, there's 3 things you don't do: bet on baseball, steroids, be an asshole.
Sure, right.
Them, you're fine.
Just drinking prostitutes all the time. You're in the Hall of Fame.
You're good.
But yeah, so nobody into the baseball Hall of Fame this year. Obviously, we don't want to end today without remembering today is 1 year since the helicopter crash that killed Kobe Bryant and his daughter, and of course the others in that crash. I forgot the names in front of me, but the WNBA announcing today that Kobe Bryant's daughter and the other 2 girls that were killed in that tragic crash will be honorary NBA draftees this year. So kudos to the WNBA for that. Obviously one of the best of all time, to think that's only been a year. Sometimes it feels like it's been a year. Sometimes it feels like it's been about a decade with everything that's happened since then. But of course, we remember Kobe Bryant today and his family. And I thought it was really cool. The family I know had said, they don't want any sort of big tributes from the league or anything like that. The NBA has honored that request. The Lakers kind of doing the little things they've done last year and this year as well. So again, we think about them. Does anybody have anything else to add before we close out this week?
No, it was just a darn shame the whole thing happened a year ago. But I just baffling. And I've seen a couple articles this year. I didn't see him as much last year, of people kind of sharing these insights to his personal life and how he wasn't a good person. It was really, I've seen a couple really dark posts about Kobe Bryant the man versus Kobe Bryant the player. And again, first of all, the guy made some mistakes. The guy did his thing. Obviously was a pretty clean cut dad, a clean cut person. Did a lot for a lot of folks in a lot of communities. I don't really see any reason to kind of maim the guy now. Just consider it a tragedy. Move on. You don't got to tear the guy down. If you didn't like him, just shut up.
Well, yeah, and I mean, especially if the if his family and then the people closest to him welcome him back and forgive him, then the bottom line is, if you don't do that, then that's on you. That's not on him. You know, everybody makes mistakes in their own way, in their own fashion, and later in his life, obviously cut way too short. He seemed to become really great man, great family man. Ant here with a question before we close out. Did you guys talk about how the media, Matt? I know this is a topic near and dear to your heart, making Carson Wentz the Antichrist. How they're basically pushing him out of Philadelphia. Yeah, that's something I don't understand. And obviously, Sean and Matt being Philadelphia sports fans, it's just kind of baffling sometimes the way that the Philly media is. It's not just with the Eagles; it's with sports across the board. Be it the Sixers, be it the Flyers, be it the Phillies. Just kind of a really strange market when you look at and it's a popular radio market. It's a popular TV market, and there's so much just negativity and kind of these easy tee 'em up storylines that just I don't get it. I don't, Matt, I'll throw it to you first.
It's all about the clicks in Philadelphia. I mean, when your three biggest sports media members are Mikey Miss, Angelo, and Howard Eskin, who are the three of the biggest dickheads I think I've ever heard speak in my life, and they're just driving controversy. I mean, controversy creates what they want most. So I mean, Ben Simmons has been traded 72 times I think since I jumped on this show here by Howard Eskin. Bleeding Green Nation, a website I used to go to religiously, is just turned into a cesspool now of every article is, hey, Eagles hire a new coach. And then the whole article is just Carson Wentz is just the worst human being alive. And why hasn't he said anything about not wanting to be traded? And it's like, what can Carson Wentz possibly come out and say at this point that's going to change anything of what you're writing about him?
It's such a weird take because, okay, so let's say today he comes out and says, I want to be traded. I want out of here. The writing's on the wall, whatever. And then, the coaching staff comes together and, they click. The new head coach obviously is a Colts guy, coached under Frank Reich. A lot of success, Frank Reich, Carson Wentz, and they start to hit it off. Like, where do you take that quote then of I want to be traded because of what's happened in the past? Like, it just seems like such an odd take. That he's somehow supposed to, just I want out. I mean, he signed here. He should want to stay here. If the team and whatever they come to an agreement that they trade him, that's one thing. That's what's up behind closed doors. But it's just definitely such a weird.
I mean, if every single time an article's written and Carson Wentz has to come out and address the rumors, then he's going to be in front of a microphone like all the time. He's a new dad. It's the off season. Probably just wants to hang out with his family and will address everything when he's back to work. I mean, I don't address anything at work related when I'm on vacation, and I don't expect the same of a quarterback who's been drugged through the mud repeatedly all year by these writers who are now like, hey, why won't you talk to us, man?
Right. I mean, like, Dak Prescott, I haven't heard any national or Dallas media asking why he hasn't started negotiations on his contract, because he's set to become a free agent. He's not under contract with the Cowboys for next year. He would, because he had the franchise tag. But no, is it because he was hurt versus Carson Wentz was healthy? It's just kind of a silly thing. Sean, your thoughts on the kind of the Philly media?
Well, I mean, the Philly media is a group of guys that just they always try to like flex their muscle, and like when they have someone they don't like or somebody that's rubbed them the wrong way, they're gonna like flex their muscle and be like, look what we can do. And they often try to push, I think they try to push buttons to see how much they can make these franchises do. And the truth is nothing. They can post whatever they want, and if anybody's got an issue with Carson Wentz or a question about what he's thinking, they'll just go to him. I mean, the Eagles organization hasn't caved to their media demands before, and they're not going to do it again. Far as is it because he's a Christian? No, that is not a thing. I saw that was a kind of a rural guy. Nick Foles, fairly rural Christian guy, probably the biggest Philly hero in the history of heroes. I don't think that's a major issue. I think a lot of it may come from the fact that when Wentz finally got benched, that they had been pushing and pushing and pushing, and then when it went, Wentz kind of came out and said some things that made them cover Wentz when I think they kind of wanted to cover Hurts, and I think that may have been kind of like a push, but it doesn't matter. The truth is Carson Wentz at his best is a great quarterback, and it's going to be on the new coaching staff to see if they can get him back anywhere close to what that best was. And I think he's going to. I think he's going to be fine. I'm curious what happens in that. That's a whole separate conversation. But as far as the media goes, there's a bunch of assholes. I'm not saying everybody in the media in Philadelphia is in that boat, but it's pretty bad. But these are guys that fought through smaller markets to get to this market. They're not in New York, like whatever. Lord knows what they do in New York. They'd string Carson Wentz up. He'd already be hanging from Times Square. But
yeah, I was gonna say the New York Post is pretty relentless.
It's not the only city that does it. These media guys they get to this point, especially now when you got to be louder than everybody else. I think we're seeing kind of a new era of media because with the tweets and the chirps and the whatever else that's going on out there, you got to be louder than everybody else to get noticed. And so to get to the Philly market, these guys have been loud their whole life, and they're just trying to be loud again. I wouldn't take it personally if I'm Carson Wentz. Obviously, he's not. He's got 100 million reasons why not to. But I think you're going to see him next year, and I think it should be a pretty interesting, hopefully, comeback story for him.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Everything is hot take based. Everybody's trying to make more noise than the guy next to him. So that's going to do it. Love the interaction, of course, from Ant, from Jake, from Scotty a little bit earlier. Everybody else that tuned in. Dave, let people know where they can follow you and keep track of things.
Yeah, we're at Huddle Up Dave on Twitter, and just want to comment that it shows you how clueless the Philly market is when they're criticizing Wentz with how beat up that offensive line was last year. So keep on being Philly.
Matt, let people know where they can follow you.
Yeah, you can follow me. It's at 3CT, the letter A. Philly as in Philadelphia, the number 8, so 3CT affiliate. You can catch me on Thursdays with 3 Count Thursday. Did want to say one more thing before we wrap up here. A long-time NBA reporter, Sekou Smith, passed away today after a long battle with COVID. So 48 years old, people, wear your masks, wash your hands, take this seriously, social distance. It happens to everyone. So please, this is another life lost, and may he rest in peace, his family as well. But, a big name in the NBA reporting world now gone because of a disease.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for bringing that up, Matt. And Sean, where can they follow you?
Yeah, mask up, people. You can catch me at Sean Shine State. That's SHAWN, Sean Shine State. Just wanted to give another happy birthday out there to the great one, Wayne Gretzky, and to the late Paul Newman. And just remind you that this week in sports history, back in 1924, this was the week of the first ever Winter Olympics, not near the events we have now, but obviously with the Olympics maybe coming back this year. Thought it was interesting that this was the origin, not that long ago in 1924, of the Winter Olympics. But hey, y'all, enjoy your Pro Bowl week, enjoy your hockey, enjoy everything else. Stay safe, wear masks. We'll catch you next time.
Enjoy Pro Bowl week? Doesn't even make sense. I'm just happy there's not an actual Pro Bowl. But you can follow me at Big Jim Sports. Make sure you are following the show at Huddle Up Podcast on Twitter and Facebook, at Huddle Up Pod on Instagram. Our home network, of course, NGSC Sports. You can find them at ngscsports.com. You can subscribe to our show, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and all podcast platforms. Until next time, folks, stay safe, stay smart, and go for the pin. We'll talk to you next week. Huddle Up Podcast is sponsored by Arena Eats. Log on to the website arenaeats.app. That's arenaeats.app for the ultimate fan experience. At your favorite sports venue, Arena Eats mobile app, pre-order, express pickup, and in-seat delivery. How do you place your order?